Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of the Oracle M podcast. My name is Eric Nolan. I'm joined by Laquan and Kevin, and we have a special guest today, Jill Martinez. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Kevin, Laquan, how are you guys doing?
Kosher.
Yeah. Doing all right, other than being scared every time I look at the internet news. So I'm afraid.
I think we're all getting a little afraid at this point.
That Putin.
Yeah, so
all those
today,
keywords.
Yeah, I can't keep up. I'm starting to feel dirty anytime I even get close to that part of the alphabet. So yeah, today we're going to talk about some current events going on, and one of the things that we wanted to start off with that Jill, you had brought up was, and I admit I hadn't even heard of this before, but it's called Repeal the 19th Movement. Can you maybe say what's going on with that?
Sure. So there were two maps that came out, and one of them showed if only women voted, and the other one showed if only men voted in this coming election. And if only women voted, Hillary would win by a landslide in almost every state. And if only men voted, then Trump would win by a landslide in almost every state. And shortly after that map came out, I think it was a man who started it saying that, well, we should repeal the 19th Amendment because that way women wouldn't be able to vote and we'd have the perfect country because Trump would win. And a few women surprisingly picked it up. And then I think that the biggest population who's been speaking out against it are women. And that's what most of the numbers are coming from as far as the hashtag is concerned on Twitter. But it started out as a serious thing, and that blew my mind.
Kevin or Laquan, have you guys seen that map at all?
It's
no, I have not.
That's if all women voted. So you got like Utah and part of the South that's real educated. So
my home state.
Yeah, so it's Nate Silver from 538. He's a pollster, statistician kind of guy. He's got a pretty good track record. And yeah, so he's the one that put that out. And I'm looking at his website right now, which is 538 all spelled out.com. Right now, he's given Hillary Clinton 81.4% chance of winning the election. Big Donnie 18.6. So it seems like even given the repeal the 19th thing, it's still, they're kind of screaming to the sky at this point, just trying to keep something happening. But yeah, I'm looking at the repeal the 19th on Twitter as well. I want to see if I can find the origin of it. Might take a little bit though.
Cool. Well, yeah, while you're checking that out, and Laquan, have you heard about this before?
No, I'm kind of like with you. I really didn't know about this repeal, the 19th, until the subject was brought up for this podcast. I mean, I did a little bit of research on it, and it's a real thing, I guess. It's of course, am I surprised? No, but yeah, no, it's sad. But again, I'm not surprised.
So, Jill, let me ask you then: do you, with this movement that you're saying, do you see that it's just a portrayal by the media to maybe put out propaganda, or do you actually see that this looks like there are just pockets out there where these cultures where women just really would rather give that power to somebody else is real?
I see that it's a real thing. There are definitely pockets where both men and women think that women shouldn't be able to vote. I have two Facebook accounts. I have my business account and then I have my personal account. And my personal account is full of people like us, and I get Hillary ads during every debate. My business my business feed, on the other hand, is full of Trump ads. And I have seen pictures. There's a picture out there of a woman wearing a t-shirt that says Trump can grab my, and then an arrow pointing down. These people exist, and they think that women have smaller brains and therefore less intellect than men. It's sad, and I don't know I don't know if they got past the 8th grade, but they exist.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary thought. And so I'm in a doctoral program right now for education, and some of the coursework that I'm going over in this very beginning is looking at educational history and looking at how we've really taken schooling and have evolved with that over the last couple hundred years. And it's really it's not surprising because we know that traditionally speaking that women have always been subjected to whatever skills directly applied to the home and inside of the home, child rearing, maintaining, a clean home, a functioning home. And somewhere within the last 30, 40 years, we really saw that there was a shift to really emphasize that women should be acquiring the same knowledge and skills that men could, even though it would still be a much tougher road to get that same level of education. And I guess, part of this is that I'm always trying to contextualize time and how that applies to different generations. And I'm wondering if this repeal of the 19th is, what generation are these people? Have you seen anything? Like, are these folks in their 30s and 40s, or are these folks in their 50s and 60s?
They're baby boomers. The ones I've seen are all baby boomers, both male and female, or older. I have seen some older women and men, but the majority seem to be baby boomers, which just boggles my mind because my grandmother was a businesswoman. She's the one who brought in a significant amount of income in the household. And so I grew up thinking that was the norm. So I am just shocked when I see these women saying that their place is in the home, or they shouldn't be able to make as much as a man per dollar for dollar and things like that. So
yeah, it is. It's a little disconcerting to me to know that there are just these pockets of communities out there that, in a way, I don't want to say they were left behind because I don't know if we were ever on the same page, but there definitely is this gap in this understanding that we live in a social world, and as much as you may have your beliefs, they are going to eventually bump up as somebody they're going to see things differently. And if we don't learn how to mitigate those conflicts or confrontations, then we wind up where we're at now, where we see these huge gaps in understanding that are so big. It would take maybe years of really efforts on both sides to go through an education process to get on the same page. And I don't know if I'm seeing that. It just seems like, like with the women that you're talking about, I've seen several images of women that are saying like, oh God, what was the other one? The grab my thing was one of them. And then I think another one was a shirt that said like, I don't need to vote. I'll let you do it. And it's just,
oh my gosh.
It's just really, it's interesting to see that, it's kind of like, and I want to be sensitive for anybody out there who has actually gone through this, but, for anybody that's been familiar with somebody or they themselves has experienced a physically abusive relationship, sometimes you'll ask yourself, like, how can they stay in that? If this person is physically harming you, how can you stay in that relationship and think that, that's healthy? And then I've seen, victims of that who it takes them a really long time to come out of that conditioning of, in order for me to survive, I need this person who's abusing me. Even though I know they're doing it wrong, you deal with that over enough time, and then you start interpreting it as, well, that's just the way that they show me their love. And I feel like a lot of Trump supporters are the same way, where they're like, it doesn't. Yeah, go for it.
I think that a big part of that too is our society doesn't allow women to leave a lot of times. Her place is in the home, or she owes him something, or she can't get a bank account or a job, or he doesn't let her have a car. I mean, I think it's more than just Stockholm syndrome, which is definitely a real thing. But I agree with you. I think that a lot of the people who are Trump supporters, and my grandmother that I spoke about, who ran the business and wore pants to church like a rebel, she is a Trump supporter, and it blows my mind. Like, we can't talk about anything political, environmental, anything. I called her the day of the earthquake in Oklahoma, and she answered the phone and said, this has nothing to do with fracking. They had earthquakes in Italy, and they don't frack in Italy. So it's like, I think the problem is Fox News, because the only place my grandmother hears this stuff is Fox News. and the governor speaking on Fox News, but it's on Fox News.
Right. Yeah, Kevin LaQuan, what do you guys think?
I am in love with Twitter right now. This is so good. So there's a great one that I just found. It says, okay, don't be shy. How many of you are for repeal the 19th because you wanted slavery again and miscounted?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's no support for it on Twitter. It seems like it was essentially a couple of internet trolls spouted off and then everyone grabbed a hold of it. That's not to say there's not support for it as a concept. It's just as the hashtag, it's basically everyone just making fun of it. And they're good.
I think it started when I first saw it. It was the people who were serious about it. But that was a few days ago. And by now, yeah, I'm sure that the rest of us have taken it over. I love that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I was watching Bill Maher the other day, and he was discussing the thing about polls and how we can't really rely on polls thinking they're as accurate, as we think they are, because a lot of times they're asking the same people. So you have the same people that might just be getting sick of being polled, so you don't know how that might persuade their decision. And then I'm one of those people personally. I don't like being polled. It's like I'm not going to really have my mind totally made up on everything until it's time to actually get down and select. I mean, granted, with the presidency, I've begrudgingly had to support a candidate that I've had a lot of questions about myself. But, being a Bernie Sanders fan, not just seeing him saying, hey, let's put our support behind Hillary because we have to avoid Trump. But now everything that I've seen that has come out since the Democratic nomination was finalized, that, on a moral level, I think Donald Trump would have our country implode before any sort of threat under Hillary could touch our shores. And that's the part that concerns me, is that I don't think Hillary's a domestic threat. I think she might put us into an international conflict. We don't know that. But Donald Trump just seems like, he'll have us fighting each other in no time. And I don't think it's healthy and wise, and to see supporters out there that just have their reasons.
I mean, but he's already we're seeing a preview of what the Donald Trump presidency would look like already. We're already fighting each other. We're already divided in certain ways. So if you look at this repeal the 19th, this to the point earlier, I mean, you have your traditionalists, people with the traditional mindset of, the woman has her place in the home. And there are, a good pocket of women out there who subscribe to that. And then there's your progressives, your feminists who want to push that envelope. Is like, no, that's not our place. Our place is wherever we want our place to be, so it really it's a conflict. Because when you say baby boomers, a lot of them were just like, hey, this is all I know. Like, why do you want to go out there and do all this stuff? Why do you want to go out there and do what a man does? Stay at home, do what you're supposed to do, take care of the kids, as you were saying before. So I think that's where the big conflict is at, because you have the younger generations like, no, I don't want that for myself. I want more for myself. You have the other ones like, well, know your place. Look how long it took for women to get for that thing to be ratified anyway. It was 70 years from 1848 when the women's suffrage actually took center stage up until 1920. So a little over 70 years. Look how long that took, before women were even granted, right? And that's just saying on the books that it's okay for you to vote, on the books. But you still have to think about all the backlash and all the pushback too when you actually try to exercise that right as well. So then you take it to where we are right now. I'm not surprised, because Donald Trump is really, it's almost like he is a time machine. It's like he came from that era and he's here now. That's what it feels like, and that's what it looks like, because a lot of his views and the things that he introduces and is just who he is representative of that traditional mindset. And I think that's why it resonates with a lot of people, especially in the South and in the Midwest, because they're almost a lost population within the United States. So it's really when you go to your metropolitan areas like, your New York, your LA, your San Francisco, even down, you can say Atlanta to a certain extent, but when you go to those metropolitan areas, we see more progressive mindsets. So I'm not surprised that this will come out of the Trump campaign, only because he represents that old school, know your place. The man is in the front. Well, pretty much the white man is the head of the household. Everybody else fall in order, what I'm saying, type of thing. So that's just my little 2 cents on that.
I still, I said a couple of episodes ago, it's it's crazy that we had 18. So we had the document, right? Here's how we're going to run this country. And then we've had some amendments. There was 18 things more important to to those people than letting women vote. I mean, I get it. You want to have freedom of the press and guns, but you would think that it'd be a little bit more than 19. And now, whether or not it's just a joke or the media grabbing a hold of it, but the idea of repeal the 19th, I weep for humanity.
Well, say everything continues on and say Hillary wins the election. What then? Do you think that we're going to actually start seeing domestic terrorism? Do you think people are just going to eventually flame out? I mean, with some of these people, I feel like they are so stuck in their beliefs, and it's just hard for them to accept incoming stimulus that could perhaps persuade or influence a change.
They just arrested 3 white dudes for domestic terrorism for planning to blow up a mosque in, is it Kansas?
Yeah, I think it was Kansas.
Yeah. So granted, we've had, domestic terrorism. It's mostly white guys. But this is the first one kind of during this Trump, clusterfuck,
Circus?
I guess is probably, this, I think we're going to see more of it. Especially if he loses, and if he loses spectacularly, everyone's going to be so pissed off that I think you're going to see, the South will rise again kind of stuff popping up. And that's going to come not without some violence, I'm afraid.
You think
I
we're
don't
going
know.
to see
I'm still stuck with, that being a given that Hillary's going to win. I personally think that Trump is so far gone, and so few people, even Republicans, are taking him seriously anymore, that third-party candidates have a little bit more of a chance. I don't really like either one of them enough to vote for them, but I have not decided that I'm going to vote for Hillary yet. I'm still thinking I'm going to write in Sanders, because if everyone who voted for Sanders in the primary, or people whose votes didn't get counted, I mean, I was voting in Arizona at the time, and I know my vote didn't get counted. So I think that there's still a chance there, even as much as it is, I think, for my own well-being and or moral aptitude, I feel like I have to vote my conscience. And I've never felt she was a good choice. Not last election, and not this one. So I think having that be a foregone conclusion, I think, is maybe jumping the shark a little bit. So maybe
yeah. I know here in Coconino County, we tend to be a little bit more. I mean, it's kind of a purple as opposed to true blue up here. But they just broke the record by 10,000 people for voter registration. So at least here, I don't know what everyone else is doing, but at least here people are actually turning out to vote. I mean, the third party thing, I really wish there would be a strong third party candidate that came out swinging early on so that we could actually see a viable third party candidacy. Jill Stein has 0 chance. Gary Johnson has a snowball's chance in hell. And
he has more of a chance than she does, though, unfortunately, which is crazy.
Yeah, but I think,
guys, loony.
Most people tend to break either left or right, red or blue. And whether that's because they believe that that's what they have to do, they believe that there is no third party capable of producing a viable candidate, or if they're just stuck in their ways. I think what happened with Bernie is the door was opened for a true protest candidate to come out. And I think you would have seen Bernie, as well as a lot of his supporters, pushing that idea of a protest candidate against Hillary. If it wasn't Donald Trump, if it wasn't this guy, I think you'd see a lot of them going, you know what? So
I don't know. I guess my feed and all of my friends who are with her now, they've all said, well, you have to vote against Trump. It was never, she's great because it was always, or it always has been this election cycle. It's been, you know, well, he's so bad. Well, he's so bad now that Republicans aren't voting for him. He has, I can't remember the last poll I saw, was like 30% of the Republican vote, maybe. So the chances of him winning are, I think, less than Gary Johnson winning. So I'd rather it's, you know, write in Mickey Mouse or write in Sanders is kind of how I'm feeling right now.
But he still has a shot, though, you know, and that's the thing, too. Like, even with all this, he still has his following, his cult following. You know, I think people are very enamored by him because he's he's a salesperson, you know, and he knows how to engage people. He's a master salesperson. That's how he's where he's right now, you know, and the reason why people are coming out in droves to vote this particular election is because in a lot of cases, these are two extremes. People feel like this will define the United States going forward. They feel like this could be the end of days. No matter who is elected, one side will feel like this is the end, no matter what. If you think about Donald Trump, nothing he's ever done, even right now, is a secret. He's always been this way. He's always had coverage. Nothing that's coming out now is surprising because he's always been this way, right? And it's the same thing with Hillary, right? You have the Benghazi thing. You have the Monica Lewinsky thing, how she shamed Monica Lewinsky, even though her husband was at fault. You know, you think about the super prayer stuff. You think about all this stuff that's been going on. None of this stuff is secret at all, you know, for either one of them. So everybody knows what it is. So it's really, what's your flavor? That's really what it comes down to. And so when Bernie, in my opinion, when Bernie came along, and I'll dumb it down, but people are like, he came with such a common sense approach. It scared people. You know, he came with such a grassroots approach to people. It scared them because it's like really, like, it can't be that easy. You know, hey, I'll fight with you, but you have to do some of the heavy lifting too. Like, we can do this together. We're rallying the troops. But then it kind of shows you where society's at. I don't want to do that. I want somebody else to do it for me. But he's like, look, if you push, I'll make sure to do whatever I got to do to get this legislation pushed, to repeal this back. People were scared of that.
You think so?
Work. Yeah.
You think they were scared? Because from what I've seen, if the DNC hadn't done what they did, then he would have won. He had the votes. So who do you think was afraid of that?
I think a lot of people push back, you know, because a lot of people use the whole, he's a socialist, you know, or he's trying to do this, he's trying to do that, you know, and they try to distract from his message, you know, so they try to paint him, oh, he was too old, he's too this. No, and I do understand, I can acknowledge what the DNC did was wrong. You know, it is, and it was public record, but I mean, nothing's going to happen, so it doesn't really matter. But I do feel like a lot of his support, a lot of people were on the fence with Bernie Sanders. It was kind of scared. You know, it's like, do I go with something new and in their mind kind of radical, or do I go with what I already know, which is like Hillary? You know, it's like, oh, well, Hillary I'm comfortable with. With Bernie, man, you know what? He's a trailblazer, but damn, you know what? I just don't know. You know, so that's just like my view and my stance on it. So I talked to a lot of people. A lot of people feel that way too, you know. So a lot of people were scared of what Bernie was doing because he was threatening to change the system as it is, and that scares people.
So fantastic,
exactly, and that scares people because
yeah, that would have been radical, but great radical. Yeah,
exactly.
It'd be like Denmark. We'd be happy. Yeah,
I think a lot of people in this country, it's part of our conditioning that when we're really young, I think it plays into this whole psychological construct that. You know, we have this great country. I just, like with 9/11, I remember immediately how much peaceful people, loving people, never felt any kind of, you know, hatred. I've never seen any evidence of that. All of a sudden, after 9/11, they were the most patriotic, go bomb the hell out of them, go take it to them. And it just makes me feel sometimes like either we're losing our identity or we're not really seeing that the majority of our country, that is not our identity. We are peaceful, loving people, and we are people who, you know, when we say progressive and progress, I think a lot of times it's like the word liberal. I've seen a lot of conservative people use the word liberal, and it's hilarious because if you look at the word liberal and look at its original meaning, it means to be free. And the most conservative are, by definition, the most liberal. They don't want anybody telling them what to do, let alone government, and they want to be as free as can be. And I just feel like this progressive notion is the same thing, that when we hear that, it's like, well, socialist, this, that, and the other. outside of just looking at what does progression really mean, it means we're trying to be more loving, more accepting, more inclusive, take care of one another. It's like every religion, especially Christianity, and I'm going to call out every Christian that is out there. It is by the words of Matthew on account of Jesus, who said, love yourself the way you would love your neighbor, and learn to forgive, be accepting, and be more loving. And when I see that being manipulated, when I'm seeing that message gets diverted because now we want to bring out the hatred and the judgment and the condemnation, we're not following into the footsteps of what progression means to be more a caring and loving. And instead now we're finding this place of hatred, and it's like it steers us in the wrong direction, even though it could be from the same source, whether it's Christianity or anything. But I don't know. I just feel like we're not getting back in tune with ourselves, and what does that love feel like in our hearts, and how do we build those connections with others? Instead, we're just getting into this selfish space and thinking that, well, the world is what I think it is, and I'm going to fight you if you don't agree with it.
That's our history, dude. I mean, we're the conquerors, right? We're the badasses on the block, biggest gun, biggest stick. That's our foundation. Came out here and colonized, took over, tamed the land. A little genocide here and there, but
one of the biggest genocides in the history of the world.
Well, the biggest, yeah. So what I think you were kind of hinting at is that 9/11 thing, right? Everyone kind of went, oh, and the reason is because they were afraid. We had nobody had ever punched the bully in the face, right? It was that first time that we got hit, and it wasn't a little love tap. I mean, this was we'd had a little bit here, a little bit there, but 3,000 people and a skyscraper knocked down in downtown New York City. I mean, that's
one event.
Yeah, that's huge.
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but I mean, Pearl Harbor was halfway across the Pacific. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of that as well, but this was downtown.
But look at our reaction to it.
Yeah, we dropped nukes.
Look at our reaction. We actually at 9/11, I think we held back a little bit compared to what we did the last time we were attacked.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, Donald Trump is great. He, like you were saying, he's a great salesman. That's what he does. That's his job. He's a salesman, and he is he's selling that fear, that same fear that was at 9/11 of, oh my God, they're going to come kill us all. That's what he's keeping that message going. So it's he blames Muslims, Jews, Mexicans, everyone, right? And it's all, we have to watch them. We have to watch them. And it's to keep you feeling a little bit unsafe, because don't worry, daddy's got you, but watch out for them, but daddy's got you. And it's, for some people, that works all day, every day. Fortunately, I think we've moved past the reaction that we had to 9/11 a bit, because we know we got lied to, and there's an inherent mistrust with the presidency and Congress and all that right now. The mistrust is so big that even if we got hit, I think everyone would still be kind of like, going in and bombing them is not necessarily going to be popular anymore. At least, until we get a Red Dawn moment coming on. Wolverines.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I was mentioning to you guys earlier that one of the things that is catching my attention that I am a little concerned about is this thing that's going down with Russia right now, and how Russia looks like they're actually gearing up for war of some kind. And I don't know exactly if they're going to make the first move, because, surely when they do the calculations, and I was looking at a map earlier that I might bring up, but I mean, they know as well as we do, you don't want to go there, because they're going to have an amazing loss of life, as we would if something really jumped off. And I just feel like there's that tension that's going on abroad and in our place in the international community, that here at home, we really do need to start figuring out, how do we just stop hating one another? And I know it's vicious, and I know it's in the media, and I know we see a lot of it, but we got to start to pull together here.
You can't take away people's right to be assholes. You know, that's you can't say you guys get along. Some people are always going to hate people. You can try, you can do your best to make progress, but you know, we're douchebags by nature.
Let me touch on that Russia thing. You know what? Yeah, it is calculated, but here's my theory on it. I don't think they are afraid, right? So when you have a bully that's out there, right, and you know by yourself that you can't beat that bully, but you wait for that one person to make a move, and then everybody else is going to jump into. You know, we occupy a lot of countries, you know, across the world, and usually where we occupy, there is a very important resource near that, you know, those bases that are out there. That's just what it is out there. So if Russia, who is the most formidable opponent that we would have, makes a move, I promise you, and this is me as being real as possible, I promise you there are other countries who are waiting, salivating, waiting for them to make a move so they can come in right behind, you know, Russia too, and join in as well, because we've done some questionable things, you know, across the world, you know, some very questionable things, and a lot of people has a lot of bad taste in their mouth, you know. So I really don't think they're afraid. I just think it's really just waiting for the right time, if that is something they are going to do. And it's to Kevin's point, yeah, you can't take away a person's right to be an asshole. I look at Trump, right, and I've said it before in previous podcasts, like he talks to a marginalized group in society, right? It's a marginalized white group of society who feel like they got left behind. You know, like, whoa, where's my privilege, or why am I not successful, and stuff like that. And then you start pointing to other people, they're taking your jobs, they're coming over here doing all this, instead of you taking responsibility for yourself, you know, and I use that lightly, you know, and pulling yourself up and like,
It boggles my mind, because the people that you're talking about, how do you not see that this guy will hop on his plane or his helicopter at the first sign of danger, and he will leave everybody? Like he has shown no loyalty or allegiance to anyone but himself, and that boggles my mind. Where it's like, okay, I understand you're tired of the establishment, and here this guy is. He made billions of dollars on his own, and he's, you know, sticking his finger to that establishment. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, and I'm trying to think of, like, you know, there was always that one friend in high school that at any moment they would just leave you in the dust and not think twice about it. And he's just one of those guys that he does not care about anybody. And it blows my mind that anybody would honestly think, if you vote for him, and if he somehow triggered World War III, that he's not just going to fly somewhere to like South America and stay out of harm's way and then leave everybody else behind.
No, he doesn't have, he didn't care.
It goes back to that traditional mindset that we was talking about too as well. You know, you have, I know we talked about it and kind of expanded a little bit, but let me tease it out a little bit. So yeah, progressive, you know, and then you have your traditional mindset. You know, you're talking to people with that traditional mindset. You know, when you go down south, when you go to the Midwest, those are very traditional, old school Christian mindsets that, you know, he's talking about. So, and if you really kind of think about his slogan,
faith?
Say again.
So faith, you think this comes down to faith? They just have
No. It's not necessarily just faith. I'm just saying, like, they have a traditional mindset of how things used to be. You know, like everybody has their place, you know, big government, you know, if you're rich, then you must know what you're talking about type thing. You know, I kind of put I put my faith in that, you know, so I think that they will put all their chips in that bag. You know, everybody else who has, you know, I want to say common sense, he's like, nah, like this dude's he's a con artist. You know, like, how can you not see it? You know, like he'll pander to whatever crowd he's talking to. And we talked about this in the previous podcast, and I'll wrap it up for this part. When he went to Mexico and he was down there talking to the Mexicans down there, he was bigging them up. He was very, very complimentary, talking about their hard workers. You know, this is a great country. You know, we could do a lot of business here. But then you get them back to the States, they're sending over rapists. They're sending over drug dealers. They're sending over all this. This is bad for the economy. And so I don't see how you don't see how he panders to whatever crowd that he's talking to. Like, and he's not even trying to hide it. He says it. I can go and kill somebody, and I still won't lose votes. You know, these are things he said, and right on national TV, and these things are looped, and people don't care. So that just lets you know. Yeah, people let you know. Like, look, they're married to him, and they're not going anywhere.
Well, Fox News is why. I mean, they portray him as this fantastic guy. They don't mention that he got his money from his father, and if he had invested it very conservatively, he would have a lot more now than he did before. How many bankruptcies has this guy had? These people have blinders on, and I think the blinders are Fox and News. Just they don't see anything else. And I can't tell you, I can't tell you how many people I've blocked on Facebook this year because of this election that I went to high school with. I have one friend from high school now that I'm still on on Facebook with. So and I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma in a very small town of 4,000 people, 50 people in my graduating class. So I can picture in my head the people who I know are voting for this guy, and they think that he's a self-made billionaire and he cares about the common man and all this other stuff. But these are also the same people who are very devout Christians who have never really read the Bible and don't realize that the Bible tells you how to beat your slaves and how to sell your daughter into slavery and all this other insane things. You can't eat selfish, you're going to hell. That we overlook, but all this other stuff is true, and he's a good, in their mind, how this has been sold to them, I still can't figure it out, but in their minds, he's a good Christian family man. They are completely convinced of that, and it doesn't matter what anyone tells them, they're going to believe that.
Yeah, one of the arguments I heard was that they were saying, well, he sinned in the past, but he's basically reborn. He's saved now. And that's like the angle that's being taken.
Yeah.
And it's just, I guess what's frustrating for me, and this is where, I've tried to remove myself out of that habit of calling people stupid and judging people, because I feel like the people that we're trying to communicate with are the very ones that once they start feeling attacked, they're just going to double down on their beliefs and say, well, now you're just attacking me. And then there's no progress that gets made whatsoever. So I try to think, what is it? Where did they leave off in their thinking and their reasoning? Because if you continually, it's called metacognition in psychology, if anybody wants to look that word up, but you're constantly evaluating how you're thinking, and you're constantly challenging your own thoughts and beliefs, and you're slowly but surely you're filtering out your own bullshit, your own insecurities, and then you start to be able to filter out of other people, so where you can actually get down to where the argument is really at, where the truth is really at. And I feel like we're not doing a very good job of that, and that's why things are just getting so out of control that somebody like Donald Trump, and I got to admit, I'm so sick of hearing his name and seeing it. I want to block it out of my life, but I can't, because I have to be real that this is a man that could potentially be elected as president of the United States. And I don't think people really understand. He's never been in that position. It's one thing to be like a celebrity star and, be the CEO and be able to fire people, do this, that, and the other. When you're going to have to start to deal with Congress, the Supreme Court, and the level of accountability, where if he does screw up, that's 350 million people that are looking at one person for the answer, one person to be held accountable. And that always blows my mind, because we have other branches of government, but for some reason with the presidency, we tend to, that's how we identify as a nation.
Well, he doesn't take accountability. So what he would do, that wouldn't bother him at all, right? Everyone, oh, it's your fault. No, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. That's Congress's fault. That's the judge's fault. If you didn't have all these activist judges, it's the thing to me at the core of this is, there is no evidence to suggest that he's a billionaire. Other than what he says, there is zero evidence. The one thing that could say, yes, I'm worth 10 billion, 5 billion, whatever, is his tax returns, which he will not release. It's the fact that people take him at his word, and he's been on record under oath in court saying, my net worth changes with my mood. If I'm feeling good, it goes up. If I'm feeling bad, it goes down. Understanding that people are just willing to take his number one thing. He's a good businessman. That's it. That's what they're holding on to. And there is zero evidence to support that. There's only evidence to say that that is not true. Multiple bankruptcies, he's been sued. It's like every few months for the last 30 years and he loses most of those cases, their entire picture of who he is in their minds is false. It is not substantiated by any evidence. And yet they're lined up saying this is the truth. It's almost a religious kind of thing. They don't want to question. They just want to believe, and they're never going to vote a Democrat, and they're sure as hell not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. So they don't have a choice. They have to make themselves believe. They have to get behind this guy because it's the only way they get to be them and not hate themselves for being shitty, horrible people.
I want to make sure, as a point of reference to that, I think as of yesterday, didn't this trial start for the alleged rape of the 14-year-old girl? So I know that keeps getting swept under the rug, but
yeah, and I read up on that a little bit, and that's a little something in there might be a little fuzzy. We're not sure yet because apparently the person who made that claim had tried taking him to court. The judge originally threw out the case. Yeah. And then it was something like, then they used like an alias name to try to do something, but really it's the same person. So I'm not exactly sure if that's a legit claim, but definitely is legit. Oh, go ahead.
What happened there is she filed the claim without an attorney because she couldn't find an attorney who would go up against Donald Trump. This is what I read. I wasn't in the room. But then she found an attorney, and the big thing that happened is this woman, I can't remember, was a party planner or somebody, was a witness. And so they have someone who was an adult at the time now, who came forward and said that they were a witness to this crime. And that's when they actually took it to court again now. And so from what I read, it is very much a real thing. And before it was, she was young and just a little girl going against Donald Trump. And my stepfather is an attorney. And if you got somebody like that against you in New York, you're screwed. Like, you have no chance to talk about David and Goliath. And then you can find an attorney and have to represent yourself. Can you imagine at that age trying to put together a case and file a case and all of the things that you have to do to get into court? So I think that this one's going to surprise people, but on the same note, nobody cares. Like, he came out and said that he grabs women's pussies, and the response from some women were t-shirts that say, grab my, and then Trump can grab my, and then an arrow. And the way he talks about women, the way he treats women, the way he treated his own wives, I can't understand this cognitive dissonance that women, especially women who are voting for him, have, where Clinton is this horrible person and Hillary's a horrible person because she knew what Bill did, and didn't, stop him. Like, she could have done anything to stop him anyway. But, when they talk about Trump and what he said, well, that was 10 years ago. He didn't mean it. And he even said, I wouldn't have hit on her. I mean, all these women came out of the woodwork and said that it had happened to them. And he said, oh, I wouldn't have, she's too ugly. So this guy, there's no rhyme or reason, I don't think, to some of these arguments.
So
yeah, I saw one argument. No, go ahead.
So to what she was saying about, and I totally agree about the way what he said about women, how he's historically treated women, and the things that he said that's come to light. I'm gonna go a different route with this. I think Trump is just an extension of culture, right? This rape culture, this the way women have been objectified.
Privilege gone crazy, gone wild.
Exactly, because
on another level.
If you just think about this year alone, how many women have been raped by these white athletes, right? And they get slapped on the hand, right? And in court, the judge talks about all the great things they still can do, right? So these women it takes a lot of courage for these women to come forward, pretty much wearing their scarlet letter because everybody knows that they've been sexually assaulted, and nothing happens, and they're left to go back to their lives, with this bearing that shame, that some of them carry around. And so again, I've always said Donald Trump really is a representation of society today to a certain extent. Like, when you look at it, I said to a certain extent, I didn't say all the way through. You know,
Yeah,
when
sometimes I want to make sure that we also don't get caught up in, and I think I do this too, but when we say society, I think it's a small amount of people in society that are really like this, don't you?
I don't think so. I just think that they do a good job of not covering it, you know, because, you know, of course, the media is very selective of what they choose to show and what they, you know, choose not to show unless you actually go in and do your own research. And so I'm not trying to paint society with a broad brush. And so I'm not saying all of society, but the dark side, the underlying, you know, part of society, I think that's what it looks like. You know, it's sexist, you know, shrewd business. That's capitalism right there. You know, it's a lot. And it just, do whatever it takes to get to the top, you know. So
I
to
think
your
it's
point, I
aspects of
agree.
society. Oh,
No, go
I
ahead.
think it's aspects of society, but also when you look at is it 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 women has been sexually assaulted in her lifetime? That's not a small aspect. Even if it's a small percentage of men, it's affecting a large percent of our population. And, you know, and one of the ways it gets swept under is it's just this small, you know, seedy corner of society. It's not all men, you know, not all cops, not all will know. But unless all the other men say this is a huge problem and all the other cops say this is a huge problem, then it continues to be a huge problem.
Yeah, I wonder. It's definitely a huge problem. I just wonder sometimes, are we, in other words, like what was it, Donald Trump's son who came out and said if a woman can't handle, I'm paraphrasing it, but sexual harassment in the workplace, then she shouldn't be working there. Basically, you have to toughen up if you want to work into that kind of culture. And I guess that's what I'm talking about. Like, is that really, I'm not saying it's not, you know, something to be dealt with, but, you know, what am I trying to say? I know that the women that need to come up and voice themselves need to be heard. And that is what I feel the problem is that we're not giving what we should be with our attention, the right kind of focus. And because of that, we're focusing too much on the, you know, Trump Juniors of the world, thinking that, okay, well, that's how most people feel, when really most men out there, I think, would want to step in and help and help those voices be heard. Because, you know, like on Facebook, I got a really conservative Trump supporter from high school who's on there. And, you know, when I saw that he went on the attack and posted an article of like, look at all these, you know, trash bitches coming out and, you know, saying that Trump harassed them. And look, they're just trying to get money and capitalize off of this. And it's like, dude, you got to allow anybody who says that they've been violated, you have to understand what they're stepping into. They're stepping in front of the camera. They're stepping in front of a level of transparency where their story is going to have to have some kind of evidence behind it, because that's what people are going to be looking for. So to automatically just shut that out, those are the people that I feel like aren't the majority. I think most people want to listen to those women and say, no, let's hear what you got to say, because we got to make sure this stops and this doesn't happen anymore. So that's what I mean by the majority minority, because I just don't want those people who are barking the loudest, like the Donald Trumps, to make it seem like the world's going to hell, when it's like, no, it's not. We still have a lot of work to do. But if we just start going down that negative path, it's like we come from a place of fear and hate, as opposed to, you know, love and really trying to heal some of these things.
So I have 2 points on that. So one is, I already forgot. Let me think. So one is that I don't think the focus should be on the women. I think that we need to focus on these men. I think these men need to be tarred and feather, metaphorically. And, you know, I think that, you know, there's such a thing as hate speech. And when you say things like these bitches are just trying to get money, it's so humiliating and so insulting and hateful. I mean, it's just awful. All of a sudden, we are greedy pieces of meat, and that is all we are. And then, what did you just say? Now it was good, and now I can't remember what it was. Anyway, but yeah, I think that I want that focus on those men. And there are too many of them, because that guy who's your friend from high school feels perfectly comfortable saying that in your presence. He's fine with saying that. And he knows that maybe some guy might say, oh, you shouldn't say that. But really, nothing happens to them. It's the, you know, then that, I think that's where the focus needs to be. And that's where we need to be really in these guys' faces about that's not okay. We're not gonna let you do that.
Yeah, and instead you have Lou Dobbs tweeting out one of the accusers' address and phone number. You have let's see. You have guys on Twitter. Just hang out on Twitter. It's awesome. Trump 2016 or America burns from coast to coast. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox will burn. Liberals will die in the tens of millions. Hang Hillary, November 9th. You know, this is these. You're not going to get. You're not going to get a real push towards stopping guys like Donald Jr. and his douchebag father. You're not going to get that because what's the quote? For evil to triumph, all you need is for good men to do nothing, kind of thing. And that's where we're at. I mean, as assertive as we are and egomaniacs as we are as Americans, we also like the status quo. We like things to be calm. Like, don't upset the herd too much. And getting crazy, saying, no, this is bullshit. Knock that off. This guy needs to go sit in the corner and think about what he did. I mean, we see it popping up in little bits, but it's not something that you're going to really see. I mean, so you have most Americans, right? More than 50% are right now thinking that about Donald Trump. Like, this dude is a douchebag. He is, not a good person. Some of them are screaming it to the mountaintops. Some of them are just thinking it. And there's a lot of people that are just like, well, I mean, it's just politics. I don't care. The apathy is why we can't get it done, because good people are just not going to do anything. And I do have a quote because I think I forget who was saying it about, the world's actually not on fire. Don't let this guy convince you that it is. It's from Mr. Rogers. It says, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, like Donald Trump, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. So I think that's an important kind of takeaway November 9th, while we're not hanging Hillary and while America is not on fire. Once this is behind us and we've done what we have to do, and once you've cast your ballot, start focusing on the helpers. You see, Haiti just got hit by a hurricane, and the entire Southeast got hit by a hurricane. Well, I mean, look at the outpouring of support. Yeah, it's not getting the news time that it should, but there's people helping. There's people going out of their way to try to make the world a better place. And unfortunately, it doesn't sell ad space as well as douchey Donald.
Yeah. I don't know. I am feeling that, with these conversations that I'm getting into with folks, it's one of those things like, I've talked about this before, but oftentimes when I start to think about, what would Jesus do? What would Buddha do? What would Yoda do? I try to think of, what would be the best approach, because I have that side of me that, it's like a Gimpo Roshi does a workshop around the country, and I think he's based out of Utah, but it's called Big Mind. And, you go there so that way you can, better understand yourself and better understand how to become a better human being. And one of the exercises that he has people go through is that you sit there and you say, okay, we all have what we call our personality and different ways that we identify with ourselves. So let's take each of those identities one by one and really talk through that voice to get a better understanding of why do we identify with that. So you say like, I have big heart. Well, what does that mean? It means I want to love everybody. It means I am accepting of everybody. But then there's also that part of me that's the controller, and where I want to control everything. The controller part of me is where if I step up to those people, I will not stop until I win. So I have to ask myself, okay, is that the right approach? Because even if I win, my bigger idea of the big win is not that I destroy somebody. It's how do we change people who do find hatred and fear in their heart to become more secure that Hillary's not coming to take your guns. Nobody's coming to take your guns. You know, we're not trying to murder your babies. If another woman wants to have an abortion, it's got nothing to do with you. You know, and it's like, how do we try to create this new movement of enlightenment where we have transparency and all this information, but connect it in a way that people can feel less fear, which I think would help bring that intensity down a little bit. So that's where I'm constantly asking myself, what's the right approach? Because if I go on the attack, I know myself. I'm that Rottweiler. I'm a pit bull. I will not stop. And
you're not. You're not that good.
No. Ask that. We'll talk about that later.
But it's making the approach. It's, you have to make that choice. What's the best approach? But it's speaking it. It's saying, here's why I don't think that's a very good statement. Or, how would you feel if it was you that somebody said that about? Turn it into, flip it and present it in another way, or however you want to approach it is great. I just think that the more men who say something about this is not okay with us, this is not a good representation of me as a man, this is not a good representation of me as whatever religion you are or whatever. I think that's what's most important, is that these conversations happen with so many of the social movements that are going on right now. It's having that conversation. And I think too many times, loving folks, we don't want to appear angry. And that's how we bomb Afghanistan and Star Wars, is because I think we are too quiet sometimes, and we're not as aggressive as the person on the other end. And they don't hear us because of that. And I think that that's their mindset. They're not thinking about this movement that you're talking about of finding that best approach and speaking softly and those things that we might put a lot of effort into. It's not even in their sphere of consciousness.
Well, that's one of the issues that I've had with the feminist movement, and in particular guys who say they're a feminist. Like, I am totally on board with feminist values, 100%. The only reason why I don't want to be referred to as a feminist is because if I'm talking to those guys out there that, are the ones that really have to have that dialogue to get better in reasoning, so they understand that they have a limited worldview, the second I say feminism, they're like, you're one of those. And it's like this, like, I'm not identifying as a woman here. Like, I'm not, like, that's not what this is. But the fact that even that word femme comes out just automatically has this whole other context that isn't really what the feminist movement was about, which is, can we just stop, pardon my French, but taking a shit on women? Can we just kind of give them the right to vote? Can we just, let them understand that we value them equally? All the things that, you would want to work towards in a society, I would think, because it's going to be more success for everybody all the way around. But that's just where, I wonder, are we just at a point in time where maybe 50 years, 100 years from now, we're going to look back on where we're living right now in today, and we're just going to say that was a turning point? Whatever it is that we're going through, this growing pain, and sometimes I really do think that's all we're experiencing. This is just one hell of a growing pain that, video technology and live broadcasting and all this stuff that's now available. We've never seen anything like this in history, ever. And now we have to, as really a species, look at ourselves in the mirror and see, we can be altruistic, but man, do we have some shortcomings. And we have to really own up to that. And that's where, as a species, how do we hold one another accountable? How do we take responsibility? So how do we involve love without it being this ethereal hippie movement, but understand that, yeah, love's a real thing, and we really do need to bring that in.
Yeah. So first, pardon my French is kind of a douchebag thing to say because you're shitting on the whole French language. So don't.
It's a matter of speech.
Yeah, it's offensive. I'm offended. You get the
Thank you, Kevin, for derailing my whole point, so you can point that out.
No, but I do think that you made a good point, though, about the growing pain, because I think where we're at right now is there's a massive disconnect between what the grandparents and what the children that are alive right now, at least in America, right? Between what the grandparents and the children, there's a huge difference. The grandparents, don't really like the colored folks. the Muslims, the Mexicans, the gays, the transgenders, the Jews, anyone, right? The kids are like, I don't have a problem with anybody. You know, there's people that, you know, especially kids that are 7, 8 years old that all they know is a black president. You know, that's not, none of that's weird to them. And what we're kind of seeing is, you know, as the baby boomers die off, and they are dying off, and as the older folks are dying off, we're moving, you know, as kind of that growing pain, we're moving to a place of more acceptance and more tolerance. We're not going to be perfect. I don't, you know, we're not going to get there all at once, but I do think that we're taking that step as a society. I don't know globally, you know, as much, but within the US, you're starting to see things starting to break more and more liberal from the population standpoint. That's why Bernie did so well, right? People were like, socialism sounds awesome. Let's try that. You know, they weren't alive during the, you know, the Cold War and, you know, communism being the worst thing that could ever possibly happen. You know, they weren't alive. They don't have that. So they're looking at it, the world of today, and saying, I don't understand why people are so pissed off at the gays. Like, let them get married. You know, it's very interesting to kind of see where we're at right now in time, but also try to predict where, you know, in 20 years, are we going to be past all this, or are we still, you know, there's still going to be douchebags everywhere, right? But are we going to be far enough forward that at least, you know, the idea that two people can get married, even if they're the same gender, is like, why are we even talking about that? Like, stop being an asshole. I would like to think that we're on our way there. It just sucks right now because we're kind of in that middle transition, and it feels painful and it feels angsty, but it also feels like we're starting to make some progress, starting to gain some ground, you know. So I'm hopeful, but it's gonna be painful for a while, I think.
I'm hopeful as well. I mean, kind of how I look at it, my approach to it is, yeah, you're going to have people with opposing views, and some of their views might be very flagrant views they may have. I think in order to change anything, you do have to acknowledge and respect their view. You know, we can't take a moral high ground and be like, hey, that's wrong, in your opinion, right? Unless it's breaking the law. Like, you know, just because somebody has a opposing, you know, a contrasting view, you know, you kind of have to realize that, and I've said this in previous podcasts too as well, like, where we are now is not where we were 10 years ago. Like, our level of consciousness, you know, our level of education, our level of social awareness, you know, and I think that's one of the bigger problems too in society is that some of us move forward so fast that we forget there's some people who didn't move as fast as we did to where we're at right now, you know, and then we look back at them and like, hey, why do you feel that way? Why are you a Trump supporter? But you know what? Maybe they didn't have some of the opportunities that we did, because, you know, each one of us here and a lot of people in society too, we are lucky to a certain extent, because if you look at some of the other parts of the population, that easily could have been us. You know, we easily could have been, you know, born in some place in the South or the Midwest where we didn't have resources. We didn't have family that puts education, you know, so we can't, you know, take a moral high ground and be like, hey, you know what, that's bad, or why do you treat women like that? But if that's what you're raised around, that's what you know, you're just the finished product of what people have been putting into you. A lot of the ingredients when you were growing up, you're just the finished product. And so for us to kind of go back and be like, hey, stop talking about women like that. And it is wrong. We do know that. But we have to like really kind of maneuver and really be empathetic, you know, to a certain extent, and really try to unpack it slowly, because of course they're going to be like, hey, I'm shutting down. As you said, they're going to double down on their stance. But we do have to respect and understand, like, you know what, hey, because we're meeting the finished product. We don't know what happened, you know, prior to us meeting them. And so we have to be empathetic. We have to be understand. We do have to get off our moral high ground. And I think a lot of us, you know, I'm not talking about here just in general, like we have to get off our moral high ground and understand, like, all right, cool. Is it worth it for me to try to unpack what's going on and try to see if I can help you see something different? Not change your mind, but can I help you see something in a different light? And then you can change your own mind, because it doesn't matter what knowledge you drop on a person. If they steadfast in what they believe in, that's what they believe in. I know a lot of people, no matter what type of knowledge I drop on them about something that's right, they don't give a damn. This is what I believe in. If you don't like it, you can go kiss my ass. That's an answer you'll get. And there's nothing you can do about it, but you tried. And that's all it is. So those Trump supporters, no matter what you say about, oh, you're dumb or this and that, you know what? They're not going to care, because they're going to stick with him because they believe, for whatever reason it is, that he's their guy. And they're going to ride with him to the end, you know? So it's a long process, and there are people going to be left behind. And that's just what it is. There's going to be people going to be left behind. That's just the reality of it. So,
yeah, I think that argument of, you know, how they grew up or where they came from is a really bad excuse. I actually had my dad, my biological father, use that on me. He called my 8-year-old daughter a bitch, and I told him that's not okay. And he said, well, I was talked to that way, and you were talked to that way, and we're okay. I was like, no, because that happened to me, I know it's not okay, and that's why we're not doing it anymore. And I do think that there are ways to bring it up and approach these conversations, and there are some people, I mean, I haven't spoken to my dad since, so, you know, that there are some people who are, like you said, that it doesn't matter what you say, their mind's not changing. But I still think we need to bring it up. I still think we need to say, yeah, that happened to you, and that sucked. And, you know, you didn't have the opportunity to do these things, and that sucks. So now let's do something about it, because I think we should all have the opportunity to have a really good education. We should all have the opportunity to eat at, you know, 3 meals a day and healthy foods, and, you know, all of these things that, you know, I think at least those of us here think important in our society. So, yeah.
No, I agree. And I'm glad you brought that up too as well. So this is in the spirit of this, I want to tease out what you just said about how it's a bad excuse. You know, let's kind of unpack that for a minute. You know, it is definitely not a bad excuse, only because, you know, when you're in the most impressionable stages of your life, right, that knowledge is being poured into you, you know, from all different facets of your life, you know, whether it's parents, you know, environment, friends, grandparents, it's being poured into you, you know, and so you're taking it and you're absorbing it, you know. So when I say that, you know, it depends on how you grew up, no, that is actually a valid excuse, you know, not excuse, but that's actually a valid thing, you know. It's how you grew up, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's really kind of, when you tease that out, that's really what it is. You don't know what you don't know. So I definitely understand the example you gave me about, like, you might know it's wrong because, you know, in society where we live today, information is more readily available, you know, but that old school mentality, it's not. It wasn't, you know, internet wasn't really prevalent back then, you know, the news was different back then, you know, the environment, you know, and the times were different back then. So I'll use myself as a quick personal example. You know, for me, it's not that I didn't respect women, you know, but when I was in the military and stuff, and this is not on the military, but the environment that I was in, you know, it was really an alpha environment. It was really about conquer, you know. I'm not saying all military. I'm just saying, like, in my particular instance, and the people I was around, this is what I knew. That's what people said. So it took me to get out of that environment for me to understand, like, that's not the right way. But when you're in something, you don't know what you don't know, you know. So, and that's really like my argument to kind of just turn it back around, was just the fact that,
oh, no,
you have
I understand that.
Yeah. You have to kind of respect, you know, where a person came from, and they don't know, you know, like if you was raised in a racist home, if you was raised in a racist environment, and you start going around calling people N-bombs and calling women the C word, stuff like that, because what you've been raised, you don't know what you don't know. You thought that was the norm because that's how everybody spoke around you, and that's how everybody referred to everybody. It's not until somebody who has an opposing view enlightens you and be like, oh, that's not how everybody talks. And then you start to realize, like, okay, you know what, maybe that is wrong. You know,
yeah, and
but
that's
again,
the key.
Yeah.
And that's the key. It's having that conversation and saying, yeah, maybe you did have that experience and that was bad, or, you know, yeah, that's how you've always heard people talk about other races or other religions. I mean, I grew up thinking that all atheists burned in hell for eternity. And when I came out as an atheist, I actually put a rock in my grandmother's hand and said, you know, it says right here in the Bible that you have to throw the first stone and stone me until I'm dead. And that's what she believed. And, you know, I kind of took that piece of her belief and kind of flipped it on her and said, okay, if this is what you really believe, because it's what you grew up with, here's what it says you have to do. Like, do you really believe that? And how far are you really going to take that? And I think having those conversations in whatever way, and for some people, it needs to be that shock and awe kind of thing. For others, it's a really gentle conversation about, what, that must have been really difficult for you. And I totally get it. Let's talk about that and see, what are the other options, and where are we now, and what can we do, and how can we, if nothing else, help me understand your point of view.
Yeah.
And sometimes that brings down the walls.
There's two things. The first is listen more than you talk, right? Just listen. You're going to understand their point of view. You're going to see where they're coming from. You're going to be able to flip the argument on them later. But the other one is I always forget when I'm arguing with someone on Facebook that everyone else can see it too. I think it's always just me and that person. I'm going to get you. And I always forget there's other people listening and paying attention. So when you have that guy that's on there that's, just being a giant, right? You're not talking to him. You're talking to his support network. You're talking to the people he does trust, so that hopefully you're convincing them through that conversation that they got to handle their boy because he is off the damn rails. You're never going to get through to him. You're a libtard, whatever the fucking vernacular is now, but they're never gonna listen to you. But if you can convince,
happy liberal.
Yeah.
That was one that was, I took that and used it as a title during the last election. I was called a fact happy liberal. It's like, yes, thank you, exactly. You pegged me.
Yeah. So I mean, they're never gonna listen to you, but they might listen to their support network, who are a little less crazy than they are and are willing to read that thing and be like, damn, Dale is all kinds of out there. We should talk to him,
Yeah, that's one thing that I mentioned to a buddy of mine, because I would see that they would get into it on Facebook, and then once you start going for the personal attacks, I would always see that's where that conversation basically stopped, because now you have like 100 comments of them just, you're this and you're that, no, you're this and you're that, and it just doesn't go anywhere. And it forced me to ask myself, okay, what would be the best approach in that? And I think what you guys are alluding to is you gotta open up the conversation so it's inviting. Because if you're trying to blast people, the natural human reaction is, you don't like me, I'm getting anger, anger is getting projected at me, hate, or that's always how it's interpreted. You hate me, and that's what you're projecting on me, so I don't want that. As opposed to looking at it from, what is this person trying to say? So that's where, Jill, to what you were saying, that's where I think the conversation gets interesting. What are the different techniques? Because there's not going to be a one size fits all. So how do we, for those of us that are apparently, and this is another thing too, this is where the conversation will always, it's a quagmire. Once both people lock into, I'm right, you're wrong, it's basically you're back on the playground. Even if somebody's more right or wrong, now you're both on the same level, and it just doesn't work. So it's kind of how do you take the high road? How do you know how to shift gears and how to open up different channels for these conversations? So depending on the personality that you're engaging with, depending on the position or the stance that somebody's taking, you already have that skill set where you can maneuver that. That's why I think, Barack Obama is just one of the most skilled politicians I have ever seen, just as a politician, because he somehow maintained, in my opinion, his integrity despite having to deal with an unbelievable polarity, and yet still communicate and keep channels open enough that if the other side is willing to step forward, there was never that barrier of, no, I'm shutting my door on you. I never got that sense from him.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to plug another podcast here, but Personality Hacker has some great information on two models. Maslow, which you guys have talked about a little bit before, I remember in a previous podcast, and the hierarchy of needs. And where are they? Are they afraid they're not going to be able to eat tomorrow? And you're up here talking about something that they can't even wrap their head around? And make sure you're on the same level and thinking at that level. And then the other one is called the Graves model, which is fascinating. I don't know a lot about it. I just started. Yes, spiral dynamics. I'm just starting to get into it a little bit the past
integral theory.
6 months or so. Yes. And, think about where are they on that too? Are they still in that militarized, like you said, fear-based, oh my gosh, they're coming after me, here's my border, you can't cross it? Or are they thinking at that higher level about how's this going for everybody else and how can I affect other people in a positive way? You're speaking a different language at that point and finding their language and trying to start there and then bring the conversation up to the next tier.
Right. Yeah, and actually, Jill, I'm really happy to hear you say that because what I think I want to do, I would like to dedicate one of our podcasts really diving into integral theory, because this is the only framework that I've seen that if we can start a dialogue around this, I actually think we're going to see a radical movement unlike anything we've really ever seen before. And I only say that in the sense that when we start to think about the other person's value hierarchy, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we start to think about the other person's value structure, which is what Graves speaks to, when we think about, Kohlberg discussing moral development, and that's a big one for me because Carol Gilligan, who also had the ethic of care, was along the same lines, but a little bit of a different, context than what Kohlberg was saying, where she said you go from self-care to ethno-care, or basically, what was the word? I think it was
Tribe.
ethno-care.
Yeah, it's to deal with the tribe, right?
Right. So it's basically friends and family. So you go from self to friends and family to world care. I don't know you, you're a stranger, but I don't love you any less. And to look at these different lines, and I did talk about this in one of the podcasts, when you look at those different lines of development, the more we can become familiar with those, and the more that we can understand, okay, this person cognitively, like you could have graduated from an Ivy League school, you could be the CEO of a company, but relationally, people don't like you. They don't like talking with you because you got off that train at some point early on. And that's where I think we can really pick this up and try to figure out, okay, how do we talk to somebody that's at that, when you talk about the different stages, who's at that, absolutist, dogmatic type of religious level, as opposed to somebody who takes like that scientific level, that science is going to, provide all the answers, to more of a pluralistic understanding and then really integrative. So, I get excited at this because that's where I see potential, and we can see the limitations within ourselves, but then also when we see the limitations in other people, are we still accepting of their limitations? And in terms of spiral dynamics, that's the difference between first tier and second tier, because first tier, no matter how high up in that you get, no matter how inclusive you are, at some point you say, well, if you don't believe with me, then F you. And second tier is people are going to be where they're at. And you can't force that. And Laquan, to your point, that's where you just check in with people for where they're at and understand that they've had that construct that led them to the moment that you're currently in.
Definitely. I mean, because the main thing is we meet people at different stages. As you might meet a person at a stage in their life where they're accepting of new information, they're accepting of new ideologies. You might meet a person at a stage in their life where they're just like, look, this is kind of where I'm at. I've already hunkered down, got the walls up and the turns ready, and I reserve the right to feel how I feel.
Why do we need them? Why do we need that stage?
Well, and again, though, but you have to have those people too. We have to have different dynamics within society. We just kind of have to. I think that's what really, in a sense, does progress the society as well too. You have to have alternating views. Not everybody has to be on the same wavelength. And actually, I think you really can't be progressive. If everybody on the same wavelength, I just don't think you can really be all that progressive. You have to have alternate ideologies and stuff like that. You have to be able to look out and be
Diversity.
like, what? Exactly. You have to be able to look out and be like, all right, what is he thinking and why? And you could find something that could be a diamond in the rough. You're like, what? He was on to something. I know a lot of people like to kind of paint Trump supporters with a broad brush, but there's a lot of intellectual people within that too as well. They just, for some odd reason, that their political affiliation just leads them there. Well, even a lot of poor, a lot of economically deprived.
They think that the tax breaks are going to help them. I think they really, but that's what they're told. It's not something they just thought up themselves, but they think that Trump is for them.
Of course. Well, Can you name one tax break that Republicans have ever put out that they're an economically deprived segment has ever benefited from? But it's not about the it's the illusion. Well, I'm pretty sure there's some.
I remember that one time under George. No, I remember the one time under George W. Remember when he gave the tax breaks and everybody got like $100 check in the mail?
Yeah, and they spent
I think that was where.
And then the economy
like
crashed.
gone.
Then the economy blew up and took a giant shit because those ideas are real good.
Yeah,
because what's right, you know what I'm saying? I know it's really weird. I even hate to say it like this too. Like when we talk about, you know, enlightening people, but who's to say what's right? Are we basing off of what we feel society's guidelines are for what's right or what's wrong? Are we basing off of what law is, what's right or what's wrong? You know, so I think it's a really, you know, thin line we have to walk to be telling somebody that what I feel and how I see things is the right way to see it, or the way you see things is wrong. Because again, that's moral high ground, right? And we have to be very careful, you know, telling somebody, you know, hey, you know what you're doing is wrong. Why is it wrong? And yeah, you can.
And I don't think what Eric was saying about right or wrong so much as being able to look at other people's perspectives. So the higher you get, the easier on these models, the easier it is to see someone else's perspective. The easier it is to think outside the box a little bit and outside of, you know, your upbringing, like you were saying, or, you know, that you were born in India, so you're a Hindu, you know, just be able to think outside of that and look at other people's models and ways of growing up and ways of thinking and really think about it and be open to, yeah, maybe that is something we need to consider. Because you're right, you can't take the moral high ground. I don't think, maybe I'm misunderstanding Eric, but that wasn't what I got out of what you were saying, that it was looking down on people so much as you get up, no. you encompass all of those levels.
That is part of the trickiest thing, though, and this is where I'm constantly learning about this myself. And this is where I actually, I would like to Jill, invite you back onto the show, maybe for the next episode. But I want to take a whole podcast and talk about integral theory, because, you know, I've been reluctant to, just because I kind of want to feel out these other issues, but I really cannot. I like, from my own beliefs, I have never found something that offered more truth than this particular unbelievably comprehensive look at human development. I mean, you take any psychological, social science, anything that has to do with human beings, look at people who have thought about this over decades and how they formulated patterns and themes and, you know, constructed a theory and match them all up against one another. And now you actually get an idea of, one, how complex we are as human beings. You know, we want to slap somebody on somebody and say, you're a liberal. And it's like that is like unbelievably demeaning to think that one label can just wrap up an entire person's life. And I know to some extent we all do it, especially if we're in the heat of the moment, because we're trying to hit somebody or we're trying to control a certain situation. So it's easy for us to do that. But the fact of the matter is, and this is where I've even learned this in my own, you know, interactions with people when it comes to conflict, the moment I cut somebody off and label them, I'm not allowing them to grow and develop and to continue on their path. I'm stopping them. Or maybe that moment might not be ready, you know, for them to you know, come to maybe where I'm at if I'm a little bit more inclusive, but I can't force them there. But maybe, and I think everybody has mentioned this to some extent, if I just bring it up, like Jill, what you were saying, if I just call out the guys that are on Facebook and saying this, I don't have to get into a full-blown argument, but at least let me say, I, for one, think you're wrong. Here's my reasons why, and I'm just going to leave that there. At least it tells that person that, okay, somebody out there is objecting to me. They're not fighting me. They're just kind of leaving this here for me to consider and then walking away. It's more like that invitation of, when you feel you're ready to address this, I'm letting you know there's a better way. There is a higher level to this. And I think the word hierarchy freaks a lot of people out, and it's understandable with the whole patriarchy of how we've come to dominate. But we all have a hierarchy that we grow up in. I mean, you start from a zygote that has no understanding of the universe. And then by the time, hopefully, when you get into your adulthood and later adulthood, you really have an idea of how expansive it is and how much you don't know, and this level of humility that sets in. So there is a progression, there is a development that happens within our lives. And I feel like the more that we can become aware of how we all dial into that, the more that we can help one another to hold each other accountable. So I would love to dig into that in one of these episodes and just kind of break it down a little bit so we can start to, and that's the beauty of this. It's a way to self-reflect and to think about your own life. And it's a beautiful, beautiful model.
Yeah, we actually have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I haven't used it like I planned on, but I actually printed it out and put it in a plastic sleeve so that we could all like put our initials on where we were feeling that day. Like, because some days it's all I can do to eat and get myself, bathed. So, it's helpful to be able, even within a family, to say, hey, I noticed that you're kind of feeling up here in your head and all in the clouds and philosophical, and I'm still down here trying to think, how am I going to eat? So I think it's cyclical. I don't think anybody can say I am a 5 in spiral dynamics and be honest about it, because no one's anywhere at all the time.
Right. Well, Kevin and Laquan, what do you guys think about that?
So, I think we were both waiting for each other to talk. I think there's a lot. It'd be good to unpack a lot of that. I think the bottom line is, try to be less of a douchebag every day and listen to people. That, because you start talking about these models of understanding human development and consciousness, or we're going to lose people, especially people that would vote for Trump. But
I don't know if that's the case.
Oh, that's absolutely the case. Come on, don't lie to yourself.
I don't know.
You can lie to me all you want. Don't lie to yourself.
No, I'm not kidding. When I think there's an approach that, if you just show people and don't label them for themselves, let them think what they're going to think. And then over time, it was like, I thought I was second tier 10 years ago. And I realized only within the last few years, I've only just now become second tier. I was not where I thought I was.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is you can't teach that complex model to people that don't even want to look inward, other than going to church and voting Republican. Like,
are they going to be listening to this anyway?
I don't think they know how to use computers.
So then they're not here. So we're not losing them, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If anything, if we are attracting like-minded people, then maybe we're just offering tools and a skill set to make communication better, to make it so that way we're opening up those channels of empathy as opposed to judgment and labeling.
But judgment and labeling are fun.
Well, on that note, I don't know. I do think things are getting better. I just think that, for those of us that are wanting to make the world a better place, I think we really need to start coming together and putting our heads on of these ideas and saying, how can we design and develop within ourselves better tools to fix this problem. So we are at about an hour and a half, and I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. I definitely want to thank Jill for coming on. Thank you very much. It's been very insightful.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And Laquan and Kevin as well. Do you guys, anybody have any last remarks or anything you want to leave off with?
Yeah, really, my last remark real quick is just, it's a personal journey that you're on, right? Everybody has their own personal journey. You have to want to grow as well. You want to put yourself in situations and environments that's going to spawn in growth as well. So it really of course, as we know, it comes from within. And the integral theory, the models and stuff like that. Yeah, I do think, it will help some people, and some other people would be like, it's hurting my brain, so I'm turning it off. But I do think it's a good tool to have in the toolbox to be able to reference.
So as I was kind of perusing Twitter and Facebook, an awesome little picture popped up. It's a dude in a wife beater tank top kind of thing that says Merca on it. And it says, I know Trump said all that stuff about sexually harassing women, but I've heard other men say worse. And there's a girl standing there, and she says, well, maybe they should shut the fuck up too then.
Yes, please.
Jill, do you have any last comments or anything you'd like to leave off on?
No, I think I'll put whatever when I listen to this, I'll have to remember what it was I forgot to say, and I'll put in the comments or something. But thank you very much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, I look forward to doing it again. And you know, when I was talking with Laquan and Kevin about this idea, and we were just bouncing these thoughts back and forth. That's what this is about. You know, I do think there are a lot of people out there who are hungry, like we are, to talk about important issues, to look at how can we actually initiate a change. And sometimes that change really is just a paradigm change. It's just the way that you see the world changes. You have a different perspective. That epiphany hits where you thought this one lens was the only way to look through it, and now all of a sudden you actually understand somebody else's lens. And now that humility sets in where, okay, maybe I don't know as much as I think I know. So it's been really fun, and I definitely look forward to the next episode. I want to thank, again, Jill Martinez for coming on as our guest, and Kevin and Laquan as well. And we will see everybody on the next episode. Till then.
Sounds great. Thank you.